Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today I'll be talking about my top 15 running backs, or my first 15 running backs, going into the season. At number 1, I have Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, last year and the year before, had led the league in rushing yards. The 2 years ago he led by a little bit, but last year he led by a lot. Derrick Henry had a great season, and I think that he can continue. I mean, he might slow down a little bit, but his touchdown upside is very big still, and I think that Derrick Henry is going to have a really big season in 2021. The next running back I'll be talking about is Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey was hurt a lot last year, but his upside, receiving and rushing, I think together is just really good, and I think that just makes Christian McCaffrey just an automatic top running back in the league in fantasy terms. And so I think that if he's healthy, and he should be healthy, I think Christian McCaffrey is a great running back, and he will have a really, really good bounce back season. But he's not as big of a touchdown guy as Derrick Henry, so I didn't rank him ahead of Derrick Henry this year. But if he catches 16 balls like he did 2 years ago, I think that he definitely could be in the conversation for the best running back in fantasy football. The next running back I'll be talking about is Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook last year had a phenomenal year. He was right neck and neck with Derrick Henry for rushing yards for most of the year, and then he got hurt. And then he was neck and neck with touchdowns with Derrick Henry, and then he got hurt. And so I do think that Dalvin Cook won't have as great of a season as he had last year, but I think that Dalvin Cook will have a really good season nonetheless. Definitely be a top 10 running back, and I have him third. And so I think that with how that offense is, they rely on the running game a lot, and so that really helps Dalvin Cook. And so I think that this could be a really, really, really good season for Dalvin Cook, but I don't think he'll be as good as last season, and I'm not sure if he'll catch 50 balls again, 50-plus balls again in a season. He might, but I don't know if he will. The fourth running back I'll be talking about is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, when he's healthy, is probably debatably the best running back in the NFL. And I think that running-wise, he's probably the best running back, him or Derrick Henry. And so I do think that Nick Chubb will have a really good season this year. And in that offense, with Baker Mayfield hopefully stepping up this year and Nick Chubb hopefully playing the full season, I think that this could be a really good season for Nick Chubb. I have him at number 4 going into the season this year. The next running back I'll be talking about is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been really solid for the Packers the last 4 years. And I think the next year, without Jamal Williams, with A.J. Dillon still learning the offense, I think this could be a really, really big year for Aaron Jones. Just wanted to mention, I would probably have Saquon Barkley in my top 5, but I don't know if he's going to play the whole season, and so I just wanted to let you guys know why I don't have Saquon Barkley ranked, or I won't have him ranked. And I would probably put him about 4 or 5, probably with Chubb and Aaron Jones, but I don't know how healthy he's going to be or when he's going to be back. So until I know that, I won't rank Saquon Barkley. Okay, continuing. Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been really good for the Packers the last 4 years, or last 3 years. And so he's been their big touchdown guy. And last year he had a phenomenal year, even though Aaron Rodgers threw 48 touchdowns last year. So I do think that this could be a really, really good season for Aaron Jones, and maybe they relied more on the running game. And that would be Aaron Jones with a little bit of mix of A.J. Dillon in there. But A.J. Dillon won't take much away from Aaron Jones because Aaron Jones has been a beast for the last couple of years, and Aaron Rodgers really likes throwing the ball to him. And I don't know how good A.J. Dillon's hands are yet in the NFL. At number 6, and this guy probably should be higher, but this is my personal list, and I think that he's going to have a little bit of a downfall this year with how it is quarterback throwing the ball to him 80 to 90 to 100 times a year. So I think Alvin Kamera, will have a really good season, but it's definitely going to be down from last year. Last year he was a top running back for the first 4, 5, maybe even 6 weeks of the NFL season. in fantasy, and he was a top-rated running back, and it might ended up even being more than that, to be honest. But I do not think that he's going to be that good this year. With Taysom Hill, if he's their starting quarterback, I think that's actually going to hurt Alvin Kamara. And same thing with, Winston probably wouldn't hurt him as bad, but I do think that Taysom Hill takes away his goal line touches and his touchdowns, that means in general. And so I do think that this could be a really big Taysom Hill year, but I'm not sure how I feel about Alvin Kamara at that point then. At number 7, I have Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor last year was 4th in rushing yards, and he had a really good season. I mean, Marlon Mack got hurt, and so then that made Jonathan Taylor the starter. And so I do think that really helps his value in fantasy. And a lot of people picked him pretty early in the draft, and that really helped. And I do think that Jonathan Taylor is going to have a really good season again. They got a really great offensive line. They have Carson Wentz now. I think that there's only positive things for Jonathan Taylor. And so I do think that Jonathan Taylor is going to have a really good season. And he'll probably be a really early draft pick. I have him ranked personally at 7. I think that Jonathan Taylor will have a great season, but I don't know if he's going to be as used in the passing game as he was last year with Phillip Rivers, because Carson Wentz likes to throw the ball a little bit deeper than Phillip Rivers did, and not as much of a check down guy. And so I do think that hurts Jonathan Taylor's value, but I still think he's a really solid player, and I have him at number 7 going into the season. At number 8, I have Cam Akers. Cam Akers last year really came on at the end of the season. He was really, really good in the playoffs, and I think that's really going to carry on to the next season. And he probably could be higher, but I'm kind of going with what I think, because Sean McVay was definitely more of like a committee kind of guy last year. And so I don't know if Cam Akers took the role completely or if they're going to trust somebody else. They got rid of Malcolm Brown, though. So I do think that means that he's trusting Cam Akers a little bit more, and that's always good. So I do think this could be a really, really good season for Cam Akers. I'm at number 8. I think that if you want to rank him lower, that's understandable. But I have him ranked number 8 because I do think that this could be a really, really big season for Cam Akers. I probably could put him higher personally. I like him that much, but I like the guys that I have ahead of him, so I'm going to keep him at number 8. But his last 5 games in the NFL, he ran for over 100 yards on average. So Cam Akers, I think, could be a really solid player next year. And the Rams offense just got a little bit better with Matthew Stafford, so I do think that Cam Akers could have a really good season, and he might potentially catch a lot of passes, so there's always that upside. At number 9, I have a guy that was pretty disappointing last year, and I think he could have a really good season this season, but I don't know if I can 100% trust him. This is Ezekiel Elliott. I think if Dak Prescott comes back, that really helps Elliott, but until I know for sure that Dak Prescott comes back fully healthy, I don't know if I can trust Ezekiel Elliott. I have a number 9 right now, but if I redo my list, which I will at some point, and rearrange it depending on how the draft goes and what teams go and what players go where, depending on how that draft goes, my list will change. And so I do think that having Ezekiel Elliott at 9 right now is a fine spot, but just know it probably will change. He probably won't be inside the top 10 after the draft and after I see what's happening a couple weeks before the NFL season or a couple months. And this could be the highest that I have Ezekiel Elliott ranked going forward this season. He's not been a bad running back, but last year he fumbled a lot. And Elliott, in his past, was not really much of a fumbler. And so that's never good. And so hopefully he can fix that. But it's not that. If their offense is very standstill, not because they don't have Dak Prescott, I think that really hurts Elliott because then the team's focused on Ezekiel Elliott. So I think that just hurts his value. Maybe more quarterbacks dump off to him, but I mean, last year we saw they were dumping off to him and he'd fumble, or it would be like a 6-yard loss or a 5-yard loss or a 3-yard loss. And I just don't know how I would trust Ezekiel Elliott, and hopefully I don't have to. Hopefully he does well. And that's what I hope for Ezekiel Elliott this week, who I have at 9. As of right now. Going forward, though, probably move down on my list. This one will probably surprise most people, but at number 10, going into the season, I have J.K. Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins, just like Mark Ingram when he was there, will benefit off the fact that Lamar Jackson can run the ball really well. I think that J.K. Dobbins will have a really good season because he was really good last year. They just didn't play him all the time right away. And now that Mark Ingram's gone, I think that this is going to be a really good season for J.K. Dobbins. And Lamar Jackson will also probably have a really good season. But I think that J.K. Dobbins will feed off the fact that Lamar Jackson runs the ball and teams have to worry about that. So I think going forward, same thing with like J.K. Dobbins, like with Cam Akers. They both had really, really, really good stretches at the end of the season when they were playing. And so the teams are starting to trust them, I think. And so then I think those running backs are going to have really good seasons this year. And J.K. Dobbins, probably, honestly, he probably could be lower, but I really think he's going to have a really, really big season this year. And so I have J.K. Dobbins at number 10 going into the season. At number 11, I have a guy that was kind of disappointing last year and who I had ranked in my top 10 a lot last year, and that was Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders last year was pretty disappointing, but I do think that this year will be a better year for him. He was hurt for 4 weeks last year, and that really hurt his fantasy value those 4 weeks. But in general, he was a pretty solid running back. He just didn't really get in the end zone. And the games when he did were against really good defenses, and the defenses that he didn't score against were against really bad defenses where you thought he would have a big day. And so I do think that hopefully this year, with the whole Jalen Hurts at his quarterback, kind of like Lamar Jackson, I think that he takes away a little bit of pressure for Miles Sanders, just as Lamar Jackson does for J.K. Dobbins. And so at number 11, I have Miles Sanders, who I think will have a better year, and he might get the ball thrown to more than last year, which isn't that surprising because Carson Wentz would scramble around, extend the play, and throw a deep pass. And that's why Miles Sanders didn't get targeted as much as he did the year before, even though Carson Wentz was his quarterback. Miles Sanders was playing a role of where like they're using him to block, or he wasn't in because Boston Scott's blocking, or Boston Scott's a better receiver, which Boston Scott might be a better receiver than Miles Sanders, but I do think that this season will be a better year for Miles Sanders, and so I have Miles Sanders at number 11. I think he could potentially catch over 50-plus balls this year. At number 12, this one might surprise people a little bit. I have James Robinson. Yeah, last year he was actually a top 10 running back. I think he's actually top 5. But I think he's going to have a little bit of a downfall because they got Urban Meyer there, new coach. So I do think that this could be a really big year for James Robinson. But I don't really know what to think about James Robinson because I don't know what their offensive line is going to be like. I don't know if they are going to draft Trevor Lawrence. They probably will. And I don't know what that team's going to be like. And so they might rely on James Robinson a little bit less than they did last year. James Robinson was really good last year, though. And so if they don't rely on him as much, I think that's hurting their offense a little bit. And so I think maybe if they draft Trevor Lawrence, then maybe he steps up their offensive level and then they get in the red zone more often and then James Robinson scores more touchdowns. That would be cool. But I don't know if his value will be as high as it was last year with the Jaguars because their offense wasn't as good and it was James Robinson was their offense. DJ Chark was hurt for a while. He didn't play very well when he was playing. Their leading receiver last year in fantasy was Keelan Cole. And so I do think that James Robinson, well, honestly, James Robinson is probably the leading receiver. But I think that he could have a really good season again, and hopefully they score more touchdowns as a team. And therefore, James Robinson is hopefully doing those touchdown scoring in the red zone this season. At number 13, I have a guy that I don't really know how I feel about his offense or if his quarterback will be back either. and that's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is interesting because last year without Joe Burrow, their offense really wasn't that great, but Joe Mixon was actually pretty good. So I don't know if that is like a good sign that Joe Mixon is finally starting to become what we thought he was going to be and maybe catch 50 balls this season like he hasn't done in his past and rush over 1,000 yards and have touchdowns, or whether we see Joe Mixon where we're expecting a lot out of him and then he shows up and doesn't do as good as we thought he would do. And so I'm really hoping that he shows up and does a lot of good things and is a really great fantasy player. But until I see that, I'm not going to rank him outside my top or inside my top 10. And so right now I have Joe Mixon at number 13. I think that going forward, if I'm looking at where players are being drafted and things, running backs specifically, maybe I'll think about that. Maybe Joe Mixon is a top 10 running back because someone like Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins or someone like that, where they draft a running back for some reason and potentially that gives Joe Mixon a step up on them because then he's not in the committee. It's his backfield to lose. And so I think that Joe Mixon, until that happens, I don't think that I'm going to rank him inside my top 10. And if that happens, but I don't think that's going to happen. So right now I'm going to have Joe Mixon at 13. I want to see a lot more out of him because if I start seeing more out of him and he doesn't get hurt or he doesn't have some issues, then I think Joe Mixon could be a top 10 running back and have a great season. But until I see that, I can't rank him inside my top 10 yet. At number 14, I have another guy that was pretty hurt last year. After the third week, I think it was, he didn't play till week 13, and that's Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler, I have a number 14 because he really does have a lot of upside receiving and potentially rushing too. But I don't think they liked having one running back, and that's why Joshua Kelly played a lot and Justin Jackson. And so I do think that if they don't rely on just Austin Ekeler like they did last year, where they didn't rely on just Austin Ekeler when he was healthy, that I think that really hurts his value. But in the receiving game last year with Justin Herbert, I mean, I think there was 3 games that Austin Ekeler had over 10 plus catches. And so that's a really big deal for a running back in fantasy. And so I do think that Austin Ekeler going forward, if he can do that, maybe not like on a day or on a game basis where 10 catches a game is 160 catches. Well, 170 now because of 17 games. But that's a lot of catches, and I don't think he's ever going to do that. But if he catches 5 a game, I mean, that's really good for Austin Ekeler, and I think that he could do it. I mean, because there's going to be probably some outlier games where he catches 1 pass or 2 passes, but then there's going to be a game where he catches 10, you know? And so I do think that Austin Ekeler has a lot of upside going forward. And so I think that he's got a pretty good shot to be a top 15 running back in fantasy. And I mean, the man looked really good. So when he came back and he was healthy. So I do think that he's going to be a really good running back in fantasy next season. And last but certainly not least for today, I have Antonio Gibson. I think Antonio Gibson, with Ryan Fitzpatrick being there now, will have a lot of upside. And he's a really good pass catcher. And he's a really good running back in general. He had a lot of games where he looked really good. And he's a big touchdown guy. He was like 4th in the league in rushing touchdowns, or 3rd. And so I do think that Antonio Gibson could have a really big year. And they're really going to utilize him in the red zone because he's definitely the guy that you would want out there because he can catch passes and he can run. And I think that in general, I think he's going to have a really good season. I mean, last year he almost ran for 1,000 yards and he didn't look great, but he didn't look bad. I mean, J.D. McKissick looked really good for them catching the ball, but Antonio Gibson's also a really good pass catcher and he's a good running back. So I think Antonio Gibson will get a lot of touches and I think he'll be really good this year for the Washington football team. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next video tomorrow. Peace.